Welcome into another video. This time we're going over our second round NFL draft targets that you may be looking for your fantasy football drafts. Without further ado, let's go in right into the first guy we're talking about here. It's going to be Keon Coleman, that wide receiver out of Florida State. Keon Coleman's one of these guys, right? He's a big body type of wide receiver, and the Bills, we have to remember, they kind of cleaned house. Gone as Gabe Davis over there to the Jaguars, gone as Stephon Diggs over there with the Houston Texans, and they had some holes to fill, and that's what Keon Coleman is exactly going to do. He's moving in here as the '1 wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills and could have a phenomenal type of season. Let's just look at what he did in college last season. Keon Coleman, like I said, he was a 6'4", 215-pound wide receiver with 50 receptions, 658 receiving yards with 11 touchdowns on top of that. Keon Coleman is going to a kind of a blessing when you're talking about fantasy football wise, right? There's going to be no competition for targets whatsoever, and Josh Allen's going to need to find himself a new go-to guy, and that can definitely be Keon Coleman. I can see him having wondrous week in and week out weeks for you and your fantasy team. Somebody you can definitely rely on with good draft capital as well, being drafted in the second round and going to a team in a wide receiver needy team. I love it. Let's just look at the depth chart for the Buffalo Bills, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. As you see, Josh Allen's definitely at that quarterback position. James Cook, Ray Davis, the rookie out of Kentucky's going there as well. We're looking at this wide receiver. I put Keon Coleman right there at the #1 spot there with Khalil Shaker. He showed some good things, and they got Curtis Samuel in free agency as well. Justin Shorter, he's a little bit of a bigger 6'4" wide receiver out of Florida. He ended up missing his entire 2023 season. I do like him as well. And then the big wide receiver Mac Hollins that they got in free agency as well. And we all know about Dalton Kincaid. He should be the main go-to guy in this entire offense, with Keon Coleman also pitching into the mix. I think Josh Allen needed some targets other than Kincaid, and that's exactly what they got in Keon Coleman. So the next guy that we're going to talk about here is going to be another needy team that needs wide receivers. They also cleaned house. We're talking about Ladd McConkey going to the Chargers. So Ladd McConkey, another wide receiver that I really do like in this offense. Like I said, they got rid of Keenan Allen. They got rid of Mike Williams. They have Quentin Johnston, Joshua Palmer there at the wide receiver position, but they're really looking for somebody to take control of this offense. That's what Ladd McConkey can do. Kind of like a Cooper Kupp in his prime type of wide receiver is what I really see in Ladd McConkey. His route running, very crisp. He's able to catch the ball at a high clip. I like it. Let's just see what he did last year at Georgia. And we see he is a 6', 185-pound wide receiver, 30 receptions, 478 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We have to remember Brock Bowers kind of took all of the offense there in an offense that really focused on the tight end position. Ladd McConkey, he was the next best type of receiving target on this entire football team. Ladd McConkey, don't let his numbers fool you. He was schooling people at the Senior Bowl. I loved it. When he was in all these practices, there was nobody that could even guard Ladd McConkey. I like it. Let's just see, look at the depth chart overview. Let's just see what the Chargers are looking like as of right now. As we all know, Justin Herbert, definitely the quarterback down there. J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, a couple of the running backs they got over there from the Ravens. Quentin Johnston, like I said, the #1 wide receiver along with Joshua Palmer, and Ladd McConkey sitting right there as well. I think Ladd has an easy chance of becoming probably the #1 overall target for this offense. And then at the tight end position, not really much to go off of there. Will Disley, Hayden Hurst, some things like that. Nothing really to worry about. I think it's the wide receiver that you want to focus on in fantasy football, and that is going to start with Ladd McConkey. The things that he's able to do and the things that he's able to provide for this offense is going to be phenomenal, especially if you're in a PPR league, somebody you may want to keep your eye on. Next guy we're going over here is when the New England Patriots drafting their best wide receiver as of right now, Jalen Polk, the wide receiver out of Washington. This is another team. They didn't clear house. They didn't have nothing to clear. They were actually cock-a-doodle at the wide receiver position, cock-a-doodle at the quarterback position, cock-a-doodle everywhere. But I think this diarrhea spree is going to come to a halt this season. They ended up getting Drake May at that quarterback position, as we talked in our last video. This time, we got a couple wide receivers, and the first guy we're talking about here is that Jalen Polk. We're going to talk about Javon Baker in another video as he got drafted later on down the line. But Jalen Polk's getting a nice, steady type of wide receiver that you can rely on in fantasy football. I think Javon Baker is going to be the better fantasy wide receiver, but again, that's nor here nor there. We have to talk about Jalen Polk because he has the draft capital as of right now. Let's just look at what Polk was able to do last season with the Washington Huskies. Jalen Polk, a 6'2", 204-pound wide receiver, 69 receptions, 1,159 yards, and 9 touchdowns to go on top of that. He was a part of a high-powered offense there with the Washington Huskies and Michael Penix slinging the football all over the field. Now, he was kind of overshadowed by Rome Odunze a little bit, but don't get it twisted. Jalen Polk is a very talented wide receiver. I saw him provide a lot of offense for the Washington Huskies, and I'm hoping that he can also do that for the New England Patriots. Drake May does have a lot of talent now to throw to because of this draft. Let's just go ahead and look at the depth chart. As we saw, Drake May will be probably the quarterback for this team. That's where I have him slotted as of right now. Ramondre Stevenson is the man at the running back position. They ended up getting Antonio Gibson over there from the Commanders. I've got Jalen Polk slotted here as the number 1 wide receiver, with Kendrick Bourne at the number 2, and then Demario Douglas. And then I have Javon Baker there as well. But don't be surprised if you see Javon Baker climbing up this depth chart. And then Hunter Henry, definitely the benefactor there at the tight end position as well. Again, it's a kind of a new look offense. We don't really know what we're going to see. New coaching regime with Gerard Mayo. Who knows what's going to happen, but I know for a fact they're probably going to be throwing the football. Drake May is going to be slinging the ball all over the field, and Jalen Polk could be one of the guys that we could really be looking forward to happening to have a good fantasy season, right? So the next guy we're talking about here is from the Panthers. We're going with Jonathan Brooks, the best running back, in my opinion, on the board. Yeah, I know he has some injury issues. He got kind of hurt a little bit later on in the season, but I think he should be ready for earlier on in the season to take over from Chuba Hubbard. Chuba did have a pretty good season, but Jonathan Brooks, I'm telling you, the talent that this guy showed was absolutely phenomenal. The vision, the cutback strength, just the ability to break tackles. He has the entire package, in my opinion. I really like Jonathan Brooks. Let's just see what he was able to do in this injury-riddled season at Texas. Jonathan Brooks is a 6 foot, 207-pound running back, had 1,139 yards rushing and 10 touchdowns on top of 286 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown on top of that. They're really looking for an identity there with Bryce Young, and they're really trying to build some youth around him, right? So yeah, they had somebody like a Chuba Hubbard, even has some veteran leadership like Adam Thielen there as well. They're starting to get some wide receivers. They're starting to get the running backs. They're even starting to get some tight end positions. They're kind of building around Bryce Young and seeing if Bryce Young is actually the man, because guess what? They're under a lot of pressure right now because they passed on CJ Stroud and ended up with Bryce Young. Now they got to fill this guy with some talent to prove, hey, look, I was correct in drafting Bryce Young. I don't think it was. I called out that Bryce Young wasn't the bee's knees when it happened. So, but let's just look at the depth chart, see what we're talking about here. We see Bryce Young there at that quarterback position. Jonathan Brooks, I'm slotting him over Chuba Hubbard as the number 1 running back on this football team. We're looking at the wide receiver position. Deontay Johnson coming over here from the Steelers. Xavier Legette, and I like that rookie wide receiver. They ended up getting him. They ended up getting Jatavian Sanders also as the tight end that we're talking about. Now, Tommy Tremble, I do have slotted in here as of right now as the number 1 tight end, but I think as Jatavian Sanders, he's a little bit of a smaller tight end, 6'3", but I think he can make some noise as well. But I think Jonathan Brooks, as long as he gets healthy and strong, he could be a dominant force. We're looking at over 1,000-yard rusher with ease, no question asked, in my opinion. So let's move right along to the next guy here. We're going over the Colts with Adonai Mitchell, and I really love this fit. I know a lot of people were kind of like, I'm not really sure about the fit. Let's just think about it a little bit. You have Michael Pittman Jr. as the X wide receiver. Now Josh Downs is able to go from the number 2 wide receiver, kind of slot me over here in the slot, take Alec Pierce just back a little bit. Now Adonai Mitchell can slot into that number 2 wide receiver role. They're filling up the entire weapons for Anthony Richardson to be successful. I love what I see. Let's look at what Mitchell was able to do with the Texans last season. We look at Mitchell being a 6'4" wide receiver, 196 pounds, 55 receptions, 845 yards receiving with 11 touchdowns on top of that. I'm loving what they are doing for Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson could be, he has got to be one of my top 3 quarterbacks, dynasty quarterbacks in football this season. I think he's going to come back. He's going to tear up the league by storm, and I think Adonai Mitchell is going to help him achieve that. Look at having a solid fantasy season from Adonai Mitchell. I think he could easily get close to 1,000 yards receiving himself, along with Michael Pittman Jr. I think that Anthony Richardson can support 2 1,000-yard wide receivers, and I think he's going to show the fantasy football world what he can do. I do like Adonai Mitchell. If you're able to get a little piece of him, I would say go get a piece of him. So last guy we're going to talk about here is the Washington Commanders, somebody I'm really high on. That's the tight end, Ben Sinnott. This guy is another guy that I'm enjoying watching football. Anytime I was watching the tape, you saw what he was able to provide for your team, and I think that Jaden Daniels, the new quarterback for the Commanders, is going to rely on his tight end quite a bit. Yes, they do have Zach Ertz right now. They signed him in free agency to come back with Cliff Kingsbury, but I think over, slowly but steady, you're going to see Ben Sinnott slide into that number 1 tight end role, and it could be huge. If Jaden Daniels kind of hones in on Ben Sinnott, I think that he could be fantasy relevant tight end, right? Let's look at what he did last season with Kansas State. Ben Sinnott, 6'4" tight end, 245 pounds, 49 receptions, 676 yards receiving, and 6 touchdowns on top of that. He does have a nose for the end zone, and that could bode well for fantasy football. If he's given the opportunity, I think he can produce. I think playing him alongside Jaden Daniels, it could be some fireworks. Look at the depth chart as of right now, as I see it. Like I said, Jaden Daniels, he's over there as the #1 quarterback as of right now. They got Austin Eckler and free agency. I got him slotted in there as #1, and Brian Robinson Jr. as the #2. But I think it's going to be more of a 1A, 1-2, 1B type of situation. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Luke McCaffrey, the other wide receiver they got in the draft as well. And like I was talking about earlier, Zach Ertz as the #1 tight end and Ben Sinnott as kind of that secondary role. But guys, if you're getting any value from this video, you guys hit the subscribe button. It really helps out, and hit a like on the button as well. It really helps out with the algorithm, get this shown to more people. Guys, leave a comment down below. Who was y'all's best pick from the second round? I am curious to see. But guys, we got videos popping out each and every week, multiple videos at that, to help best you conquer your leagues and ultimately just raise that championship. Can't wait to see you guys on another video. We'll see you guys next time.